Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I already know that probably a few times in today's conversation, you're going to think that we are already in the future. And you know what? You're right, because we've got an incredible, not only entrepreneur, not only innovator, but also inventor here in today's episode. I'm so excited for all of us to really hear the ins and outs of how the world is changing thanks to advanced technology. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Adam Hopkins. Adam is a veteran founder and CEO who has held leadership roles in electronics and advanced manufacturing hardware and software companies at various stages from conception to product launch to scaling. He has a proven track record of building businesses from the ground up, forming and leading executive teams to achieve key goals in a limited time frame. He is a recognized inventor and scientist, author of numerous patents and peer-reviewed papers in physics, mathematics, materials, and manufacturing. Adam holds degrees from Princeton with bachelor's in physics and a master's and PhD in chemistry. So I'm from Boston. I think it's safe to say that this guy is wicked smart. I'm super excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Adam Hopkins. All right, Adam, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Brian. Glad to be here with you.
Yes, we are so excited to have you. Obviously, you heard that I believe that you are a wicked smart guy and fellow entrepreneur. So I'm excited to hear your story. Let's start there. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Adam? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, sure. So, my whole life I've been excited about a couple of different things. Two of them most salient to our conversation, science and business. And I like to see science with practical ends, right? When you're able to take something that's a cool idea that people aren't familiar with, maybe it's technically challenging, and turn it into something that's saleable, that's a product that can be used by the world at large, not just thought about by people in an ivory tower. Then that's what gets me going. So that's the background. I've spent the better part of my life doing this. I have a PhD in chemistry, master's in physics, and BA in physics as well. But I've spent the last 15 years starting companies, leading companies in hard tech space and in software.
Yeah, I love that overview, Adam, for so many reasons, but obviously it's because I'm leading you right towards where I'm so excited for listeners to hear about, which is your company today, because it's very cool that we live in 2026 where you're in New Jersey, I'm down in Florida. People can hear us right now, and if people are watching, then they can see us on YouTube. They can actually see us, but you don't believe that that's enough senses for us to make sense of the world and for us to move business and life forward. So introduce us to your current venture.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love the way you brought it up. So yeah, we've got this great video and audio system, and we can call that Sight and Sound, digitized Sight and Sound, and it's sort of a recent development. Recent not in my lifetime, but with respect to the advancements, even the last 50 years, it's pretty incredible. If you take us back 100 years, the telegraph was still broadly in use, and now we're at the point where we have audio, we have 3D sound. And with respect to video, naturally, we used to have vacuum tube TVs and film-based cameras even 100 years ago, of course, in black and white and low resolution. But now everybody's got a computer and even a phone with video and audio at their fingertips, which leads me into the fingertip point. Why not touch? And what can we do with touch? Touch is more fundamental than sight and sound, as a sense. In other words, it developed evolutionarily speaking earlier. It's more complicated. There are more types of sensors and little organelles involved in it. And sure enough, our whole body is covered with touch receptors. So why haven't we digitized it yet is a fundamental question. And I won't answer my own question, but that's the lead-in for Sensetics.
Yeah, I love that. And when we talk about Sensetics, it's funny, Adam, because when I read about the nature of what you do, my mind instantly goes to, and truth be told, I had a conversation with AI about this, of, wow, if we could do this in today's world, what are all the use cases? Because honestly, my first gut reaction was, I can't think about how that interacts with my day-to-day life. But then giving it a little bit of thought, Adam, I can't think about, how it could be limited. It seems infinite in the possibilities, obviously in warehouses and manufacturing in so many different ways. So introduce us to some of those why, some of those how does this work? What are those use cases? Because I'm sure that you guys internally are probably thinking along the lines of I am, that the possibilities are limitless.
Yeah, absolutely. So with respect to digitizing touch and bringing it up to speed with audio and visual, and I'll say two words about that very briefly. We've got touch screens, right? But they don't record how something feels like, as we know. They just sort of record where you poke it, and they're pretty fragile. So if you tried to deploy these the way we just deploy our phones and our microphones and our cameras on there, then clearly it's not gonna go over as well, right? So with respect to that, when you digitize touch, you're recording what something feels like. You have hardware to do that, and what Sensetics is doing is also introducing the hardware as well as the sensing hardware to record realistic touch, to play it back. You can feel it also, and we're not at the point where we're going to put a scan over your entire body to have a complete body immersive sensation, although maybe that's, look a little bit farther into the future, that's the case. But we are at the point where, Brian, if you had one of our sensors, our haptic devices, and I had the sensor right now, I could touch something and you would feel it. And that also involves a lot of software, as you pointed out. And the applications, jumping into to answer your question directly, are significant. If you just think about something simple, since we're talking via this teleconference, what if someone's online shopping and they're looking at shirts and they want to know what the shirt feels like, or dresses might be more relevant example. And this is possible, and it's possible at not great cost. But take it another level, what about robotic surgery? Right now, robotic surgery is performed by doctors who's trained for years to attempt to replace touch, because they learn to be surgeons via their sense of touch, but they learn to be robotic surgeons by learning how to bypass that. And what if they could bring it back? Imagine how much more effective surgery could be. And I'm not the only one who thinks about this, but there are a couple of exciting ones. Not to mention, and I'll mention just this third one, is conferring touch to robots, right? If a robot can feel, and getting into the world of AI, right, then a robot can use touch sensations to enact dexterous manipulation. It can have robot hands that function more like human hands in unstructured environments. And that's a whole new world of capabilities in industry and service, in the warehouse, in a variety of different places. So there's a lot you can do with it, but maybe that's 3 applications that are exciting.
Yeah, and there's so much to unpack there, Adam, because I tease it at the very top of today's episode. It feels like you're talking about the future, but obviously the work that you're all doing, this is the present. There's so many incredible technologies, but I'll call this out. Something that I think makes you so uniquely situated in your intersection of the market, and why I'm really grateful that you are the founder and CEO of Sensetics, is because you give equal parts attention to the hardware and the software. And I'll out myself. I'm a total tech junkie. I love technology. I'm an early adopter of a lot of cool tech, including Apple Vision Pro, which is the first kind of mass market, in addition to the Meta Quest, the augmented reality market. And Adam, it's an unbelievable experience. When I put it on for the first time, I thought, holy cow, it looks like I'm literally staring this orangutan in the eye. But of course, it's missing the key ingredients. I can see it and I can hear it, but I can't touch those things just yet. And it really made me understand that software is incredible. The lenses in front of my eyes as the hardware are also incredible, but this is the culmination of good software meeting good hardware. Where do we go from here? What's the harder part of that equation? Because they have to work in tandem.
Yeah, absolutely. And Apple Vision Pro is a great example, as you mentioned, because it typically doesn't use a controller or touch interface. But if you want to interact with a 3D world, and I'm glad you brought up virtual reality, because this is where it's a very significant growing field right now. But imagine the productivity benefit you could gain, and just working on a computer, if you could work in a 3D environment instead of 2D with a mouse click, pardon me, as opposed to being able to interact in 3D with what you can see, perhaps using a type of controller that involved touch sensations on the hand. And obviously, I'm not the first one to have thought of this, but without realistic low latency touch sensations, you can't get there, is what we've discovered. For example, we've spent a lot of time, we collectively, mostly companies, big companies in the US, but also elsewhere, have spent a lot of time trying to use cameras to teach robots to perform tasks that humans do with their hands, right? And what we found is that it's very hard. Cameras aren't very good at, as we know, at predicting distance. They're not very good at predicting velocity. If you don't know distance, it's even harder to do velocity, right? And they're not up close to things, right? So if you don't have distance velocity for manipulation of objects, then and you need it very fast, then there's little you can do to act in the way that humans do. And so the point being is we've sort of discovered now within the last few years that a much larger AI model and 10 more cameras won't get you to that point. You need to use a new sensation, an entirely independent vector of information, totally different from cameras and images, totally different from sentences and languages, but touch information, which in humans is entirely different. And maybe the conclusion there is we evolved this way for a reason, is we need touch to dexterously manipulate objects and perform these tasks, and therefore we need it if we're going to have robots do.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing the way you talk about it, Adam, because listeners have had to listen to me for many years now. I've driven a Tesla for a long time. And so Tesla, obviously, FSD is such a cool innovation. And I often think about Elon Musk has made the argument very publicly that the reason why he doesn't put LiDAR sensors on Teslas, not only is it a cost thing, but he says human drivers don't have LiDAR sensors. And so I often think about the fact that when we drive, Adam, we use our cameras, our eyes, and then we use our minds. Our brains, which obviously is the AI. However, I have one giant complaint about Tesla's FSD technology, which is it has no idea what it feels like to go over a giant pothole. And so that's often when I take over and I drive manually, is I don't want to experience that terrible feeling of a pothole. And a computer doesn't know what that feels like. And so obviously Tesla has brought that technology into consumer level devices or cars, which is unbelievable. When you look at the landscape of the technology that you're pushing the envelope on, is this something that we're going to see at the consumer level soon? Is this something that's reserved for the enterprise level in manufacturing and robotics? What's your take on where it fits in the market out of the gates?
Yeah, exactly. I like the car driving analogy. And do you need touch to drive a car? Yes, if you want to avoid going over a pothole, if you want to know how much rough damage your vehicle is taking. So maybe that's more of a different type of vehicle driving question, because our roads are hopefully most of the time fairly smooth. At least they are around here when it hasn't snowed as much as it has recently. But we do have some form of LiDAR, and I'll put an asterisk there. We have some form of distance detection in our ears, right? When we hear the Doppler effect, when we're moving towards an object or away from objects with that has a sound coming out of it, we can tell which way it's going from that perspective. And cars do sometimes use acoustic sensors, which is not that different from touch, right? To detect how close they are to things. That's the beeping and the backup noise when you're backing up into a place. But so do you need it for robots and the types of things that robots do? Well, it depends on what the robot's doing, as you pointed out. And what do we use touch for, right? If we're, putting torque onto an object or picking up an egg, right? We kind of figure out it's an egg in advance or figure out it's a soft object. But we feel it breaking, we feel it slipping, we feel it cracking, and we need to do something about that, right? If we have a pitcher of water and we're trying to pour the water, we feel the weight of the object change in a way that's actually very difficult to calculate using camera data. Mass is virtually impossible to discern from cameras, but really, really easy. Weight, right, is really, really easy to discern from touch. You pick something up, you know what it weighs, more or less. So these are the type of objects where touch comes into play as being immensely valuable and important.
Adam, a lot of people are going to hear you talk about robotics as many times as you have in today's conversation, and they're going to think, gosh, that's a scary future. I feel like everyone's kind of shaking out, where's AI fit into the economy on a macro level? Where do robotics fit into that? Are they replacing jobs? You've got your finger on the pulse in so many different ways, including in manufacturing. So, Adam, I want to zoom way out with you at that macro level. What's your take on what all of these advancements mean for us societally, economically, culturally?
Yeah, great question. And I appreciate the rub to manufacturing. I've led more than one advanced manufacturing companies in my day. So it's a field that I'm well versed in and excited to chat about. But yeah, with respect to advancements in technology, these arguments go around that AI is going to take our jobs, or robots are going to take our jobs. And then there's the counter arguments. Well, it turns out when technology advances, as in the past, we see that actually new jobs are created. Some go away, but most it starts with productivity improvements that actually build and grow the industry where the improvement occurs. So it starts with something where a human's still involved, but they're using a robot as a tool. And there are lots of new advancements in robotics in this space that are exciting, where humans go out, say, if you're surveying a property, if you're a surveyor, you used to use, I guess not a robot, but a tool. You'd use a little a laser device. You'd plant it, you'd plot it. But now there are robotic equipment. You might take along a little robotic equipment, a rolling piece of equipment or otherwise, to help you out. And I'll name that example as just one. There's a great many. But as robots come into play, will increase human productivity. There'll be jobs around the robots, jobs that involve managing the robots, telling the robots to do things, teaching the robots to do those things, overseeing the robots, etc. And the productivity improvements in this space, I would suspect, are just like in other industrial improvements in the past, bound to exceed the job losses in the near term. So we're looking at job growth due to these advancements, certainly in the near term. And we're actually seeing that in the numbers too. And I won't start talking statistics right now, but the manufacturing data shows that there's job growth in areas where people know more about robotics, more growth in these fields and physical AI and the like. And the reason there's growth in these fields is because more people are using these tools. And when you use these tools, you can do more. And therefore, people are hiring in these spaces. So there's an increasing number of jobs and a net increasing number of jobs as opposed to decreasing, which is nice.
Yeah, so well said, Adam. I really appreciate your insights there, because this is a macroeconomic conversation that's happening on the national scale. Just tune into your nightly news and you're going to see a lot of maybe less informed people fear-mongering. So I'm really appreciative of hearing your thoughts from the inside. I've got to ask this question because hearing the way you talk about it, sorry if this is an ignorant one on the surface level, but to me what's been really fascinating about AI is all of us getting to see through the large language models, ChatGPT, Gemini, all these ones that we as consumers use every day. We can kind of see hints as to how they're trained. And we know that obviously they've been trained on a massive library of data and content and literature that has been on the internet for a long time. You really get me thinking though, and maybe this is touching the software side of your brain. How do we train touch? How do we have a software that understands what it's touching and how to make sense of all of that?
Yeah, great question, and I could give a really long answer, but I'll try to say it as concisely as possible, right? And so another analogy, probably a relevant one, is MP3, right? We know it's out there. We've seen JPEGs and MP4s. These file formats condense an enormous amount of visual and audio data into something that still looks pretty real to humans, and particularly at high resolution. But a lot of work went into developing those. Actually, I believe. Fraunhofer developed some of the initial information and code to index and reduce, if I remember properly, it's the JPG data. And they made a lot of money in licensing off that. Side comment, but to do it with touch, you got to do the same thing. And the first question is, can we take information from all of the touch sensors in our body simultaneously? And the answer is no. That would be very painful. The mind has to pay attention to the sensors that are most active at this point in time. And again, what do I mean by that? I'll draw an analogy. Your eyes are only very, very high resolution in about a 5-degree arc from the beginning. So very, very much direct in your line of vision. For those who are listening to the podcast, I'm looking straight ahead and pointing. And when you see something in the rest of your vision, it's very low resolution, but it catches your eye. You change the direction of your eyes to focus on it, and then your brain remembers what it saw. And the first answer to the question with touch is, you need to do that with touch as well. You need to focus on the information that's immediately relevant from the 7 different types that we know about of mechanoreceptors and nerve cells that deliver touch information in your body. And that's the way we start with indexing this data. And then what is this data? Well, it's a lot of different impulses, mostly electrical impulses, not quite the same as vision in that sense or sound. But those electrical impulses come from these different mechanoreceptors in different ways and interpreted in different ways, depending on the type of force that's being applied. So it's not just about pressure. right? It's about frequency. And it's not just about pressure and frequency at one little point. What if you move over a little bit? Touch is about 400 micron resolution, right? So move over 400 microns, then you've got maybe a slightly different pressure and frequency, but then I'll take it a different way too. And what gets really exciting is it's not just about where you're poking it, but what direction. So your mechanoreceptors don't just detect pressure and frequency at high spatial resolution and temporal resolution, right? They also detect the direction of the force. And when you get into higher modes of force, what's a higher mode of force? Well, like your skin stretching is a higher mode of force, or your skin twisting. If you think about a twisting motion, you're able to detect that with these. That's why you have 7 different types of these things to pick up on these notions. And you can, with a lot of good data that's focused on the area of impact, detect and extract those modes the way Sensetics has developed hardware to do. And that's how you can record touch and index it and make it in, I've skipped over a whole bunch, but condense it in such a format that it's transmissible in real time the same way that sight and sound are, without getting into gigabytes of data per second or something of that sort.
Yeah, it's so cool hearing the way you talk about it. And I fully appreciate, Adam. I think in a past life, you must have been a professor, because you're certainly making it along the lines that we with non-technical backgrounds can even follow along there. And it makes me want to ask you this, because I do think it's an exciting future where even non-technical people have entry points into hard tech, especially through entrepreneurship as the vehicle. And I think that we see it in the programming space. Historically, unless you were a programmer, you couldn't build an iPhone app, for example, but now almost anybody can, and that's a really cool development there. You have some strong thoughts, though, when it comes to hard tech entrepreneurship for people who do want to get their foot in the door there. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because you are solving massive societal problems that will excite a lot of entrepreneurs, because we are natural problem solvers, but there's ways for us to get in there. You obviously have a ton of experience in that domain, so what's your advice for entrepreneurs who are thinking about going that avenue?
Yeah, well, sometimes I do give talks at universities, by the way, but I've never been a professor yet. I appreciate the compliment. I hope it was meant that way. But with respect to entrepreneurship, that's often one of the topics of a talk that I've given before, or several. And I think the most interesting question to ask yourself is, and this is the Wantrepreneurs podcast, right? So this is definitely the right audience for this question. Is do you really want to be an entrepreneur? And what kind? Do you want to and if you want to be a hard tech entrepreneur, that usually implies inventing some new device or pairing up with somebody who has invented a device. You don't have to be the boss. You don't have to be the inventor. As was suggested a minute ago, there's lots of roles in hard tech companies for people involved in marketing, sales, PR, and applications. I could go on and on. It's a business, right? So there's lots of roles you can take. And the first question to ask yourself, in my opinion, is what role suits you? What's going to be exciting for you? What's going to make you enjoy it? Because if not, then if you're not going to enjoy it, go do something you will enjoy. Is a reasonable statement from my perspective also.
So I'll go there with you while we're on the air, because you are a multi-time entrepreneur. And I think that one thing I love calling out on the air is that when all of us chose to become entrepreneurs, so if I love marketing, the day I become an entrepreneur, I'm no longer just a marketer. I get to do marketing, but I'm no longer a practitioner. There's so many other things that come with being a founder, being an entrepreneur, being a leader of people, being an innovator in that space. Adam, you seem to have embraced the entrepreneurial side just as much as you also embrace the scientific, the invention, the innovation side of things. What has that transition looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I mentioned before I was in grad school at one point in time studying chemistry and physics, and I guess that makes me a nerd, and I probably still am one, which I'll own and be proud of. But hopefully one that's cognizant of the business world and the rest of the world, and not just the world of academia, and it'd have to be that case because it's been a long time since I was in the academic position. The transition, that's a long story, but I would go back and say, at least in my case, I've always been excited about business. I started an online business in the .com era before I left high school. By the way, it didn't do that great. Big surprise. You've got to try and try again if you really want to thrive. And your first idea shouldn't never be your last idea. Because it probably won't work. And there's other reasons too, because new ideas are fun and they're exciting to get involved in. So, and that's the position I've taken is, so I left my last company at the end of 2023. We sold it. I actually moved out here to Princeton. I was in the Bay Area at the time. And my view on, hey, let's found and start a new company is the new technology excites me, but it's the new idea, the new possibilities to take something and introduce it to the world, which is even more exciting. So am I an inventor? Sure, I've got lots of inventions. I've written plenty of scientific papers, but the part of it that I think that's really driven me all along and that seeds my passion is to take something that's exciting, mine or not, and bring it to the new world and bring it into the world and show it in a new way and try to get it out there to people in a way that they'll be able to enjoy it.
Gosh, Adam, I'm so appreciative of those insights that you just shared with our listeners. I find myself often on the air saying the advice. Maybe people love to hear it. Maybe they think it's completely pointless advice. But I often harp on the fact that if you've never started a business before, any business is the perfect business to start because you just need those business reps. You need to get rejected. You need to face failure. You need to realize that you don't know how to sell things. You need to realize that you don't know anything about marketing. That's the only way that we got this experience. You've obviously iterated and evolved and had successful companies, less successful companies. You've had the entire entrepreneurial experience throughout your lifetime. What's your filter these days for knowing what it is that you want to pursue? Because I would imagine that ideas are a dime a dozen for you. How do you choose what it is that you want your company to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So my own ideas may be a dime a dozen, but that doesn't mean they're, like you say, you can't turn dimes into dollars all the time. So other people's ideas, great, and that's the first goal. Look at other people's ideas, things they've invented, things they've worked with. So I worked at a VC firm in 2024 and had the opportunity and the chance to do that, which is really enjoyable. And I'd worked in finance earlier in my life, by the way, as well, which is nice. You got to know how the money gets from A to B if you want to start a hard tech company, which is going to cost probably millions of dollars to fund, many tens of millions before it's profitable in many situations, if not all. So why do I look at other people's ideas? Is a great question. We have the internet. You can go read. You can read scientific papers if that excites you. You can read what people are advertising. There's no doubt that people exaggerate quite a bit in advertising. So the next step is if you see something that really catches your eye and that's exciting to you, go looking for it, one. But if you're in an area that you know something about, then go investigate it further. Go fact check it, right? Make sure that it can do what people say it can. Go read the patents that are underlying it. They'll be there. Go find some scientific papers about it if you can. Just go find what other people say about the similar technology. But that's the way to get started, and then it's a lot of legwork, right? You end up doing that for long periods of time. And I'll add one more point. There's many other things in between there, but one I think is important is for each one of these, if you find something that you really think is a good idea, and what you do is you try to figure out other ways of doing it that are cheaper, simpler, right, or better. And then you try to figure out why, if there is one, then actually you got to give up that idea. Go find a different one. Because if there's a cheaper, simpler way and it's already being done, then you're out of play. If it's not being done, you have to figure out why it's not being done. And usually the answer is because people don't want it. So you go looking for these red flags, right? Is it capable of being done cheaper and simpler? Do people really want it? And if you can't find any red flags after sort of an exhaustive search of several different technologies, then maybe you've got an idea that's worth really driving forward.
Yeah, so well said. Gosh, Adam, that's going to become the answer that when people talk to me about struggling to come up with a business idea, I'm just going to send them that answer right there because I think it's so brilliant. And it also takes the emphasis off of us personally. I think that as entrepreneurs, or I'm going to shout out all those wantrepreneurs out there, oftentimes we think we have to have the answers. We have to make all those decisions. But I love the fact that you've pointed out it's never been easier than it is today to leverage other people's work, research, ideas. All of that is available at our fingertips. So you've dropped so many nuggets of knowledge on us that I have no idea how you're going to top all that to answer my final question. But I always ask, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys. And as a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, so when you're doing what you love, then you love doing it. The rest of your life it tends to be great also. And you only get one life, at least so that we know of. And you want to live that life and enjoy it. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're typically doing what you love. So even though it's a bumpy road, or I tend to call it a roller coaster sometimes, lots of ups and downs, lots of excitement, some boring parts when you're stopped, but mostly excitements and ups and downs. But if you really love it, then it's something that will be fulfilling for you. Even when there are failures, even when things don't go your way, which is bound to happen many, many times. It is a long road. You've got to fight to run this path, particularly if you're a founder. But it can be very rewarding.
Yes, so well said. I often say the juice is worth the squeeze. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it's absolutely worth it. So Adam, you're such a shining example of that. I'm really excited for listeners to go deeper into all the cool things that you're doing, to actually see it for themselves, then one day to touch it for themselves. Because I will say, as someone who, from the second our pre-production team landed on your website, it is by far, we shared it in our internal team Slack, it is the coolest animation I've ever seen at the top of a website. So I'm excited for listeners to see it. And if they want to go deeper into following along your journey, drop some links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Much appreciated on that. Definitely go to our website, senseticscorp.com. That's Sensetics, SENSETICS, CORP.com. Hate to have to spell it, but that's the way you get there.
No, all good. Listeners already know the drill. We are also dropping that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So if you're on the go, don't worry about taking notes. You can always click right through from the show notes. So Adam, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Likewise. Many thanks, Brian. It's been a pleasure.